teach him other ways of getting attention, and we maybe stop giving him as much attention or as much good quality attention when he is making these sort of threats, over time, what he learns from that is, okay, if I threaten to hurt people, I get a bit of attention, sure, because I have to, but I don't get loads. Whereas if I do it this way, in a more appropriate way, I get lots of attention. I get loads of praise. I get told I'm doing really well. And so that becomes more important to them. They start to use that behavior more. So again, it's about analyzing and trying to work with the cause of those behaviors rather than the behavior itself.
Brilliant. The next question doesn't have a name, but it's one that really resonates with me. What's the best way to get my son to do more of his schoolwork without him constantly refusing to do it, even when I offer to help him?
So the things that struck me about this question was, first of all, it says more of his schoolwork. So I'm just wondering, has he already done a certain amount and then this parent just wants the son to do more? And I wondered where the impetus for wanting them to do more has come from. Is it because the school is saying that you need to do more because you have to get through this qualification, or you have to pass this assessment or whatever? Or is it something because it's quite a nice way of keeping him happy and active and in a certain, in the kitchen or the bedroom or whatever when he's at home? And the other thing that's really important is what age is this young person? So if it's a 6-year-old that the parent is really trying to help a lot with their reading and their writing, maybe that's one thing. But if it's a young person who's in the middle of their GCSEs, that's an entirely different thing. So another thing that needs to be taken into consideration is as well, does that young person have any difficulty normally doing their work? Have they got any learning difficulties or any other issues? So for example, if this is a young person that may have diagnosed or undiagnosed dyslexia, or they may find work difficult, then that needs to be taken into consideration. The other thing is, I think it's really, really important. I mean, it might be that the parent is wanting to know how to help their young person get on with work now, because I know that the situation with schools in the COVID-19 situation is that there are a lot of young people at home expected to do schoolwork, while there are vulnerable young people and the children of care workers, key workers, who are going into school to have what is being called childcare, and it might seem a little inequitable. So if it's in this situation, I think that's an immense change, and many people are really struggling with that. Even some of my teacher friends are finding it very difficult to. You'd think a teacher and a parent, having both of those skills, you'd know exactly what to do. But I have the same issues with my own children. They won't let me do anything with them. So don't beat yourself up too much. Think about whether it's necessary. If it's the COVID response, do your best. Don't worry too much about it. And what I would do is come at it in bite-sized chunks. If we're working at home, I can't sit for the full day and sit at my desk doing computer. I need to break from it every now and again and have a cup of tea. Thank you. And I think it's about making it bite-sized chunks, making sure it's necessary. And the other thing is, effectively, he's going to be expected to be working independently to some extent. It might be that the work actually might not be suitable for him to work independently. The typical situation he's been used to is working in a classroom where there's ample support at his beck and call, which is their job. And sometimes young people simply don't want their parents to be doing that role. That was what I found from my personal experience.
Yeah. I think the only thing I have to add to that is it's a very short but succinct question. I think it's hit home for probably about 2/3 of the nation right now with children. I think the only bit of advice I have on that is that, so within behavior analysis and behavioral psychology, there's a term that is behavior goes wherever reinforcement flows. And so that is the idea that if there is something that person wants to work for, they will work for it, and they will do behaviors to access what it is they're looking for. So I would probably suggest, and it's very similar to the next question actually by Tatiana, is that if you have children doing refusals, it's looking for reinforcing activities, reinforcing people, reinforcing toys, things that that person really enjoys. And then what you do is you make access to those reinforcers contingent upon doing certain amounts of schoolwork. And it might say, like Sarah's suggested, it's not about, saying, right, we're going to do a full 6 hours, then you get it. You would start by doing very, very small 5-minute engagements. You get 10 minutes to do this. And then you build it up slowly over time. But effectively, if you provide reinforcement contingent on a behavior, that person will start to use that behavior to get to where they want to be. And that's effectively the guiding principle of behavior analysis.
Oh, we got Sarah's back. Yeah, as Matthew reference to then the next question from Tatiana. My son's in a refusal phase. It started a couple of months ago at school and at home. To every suggestion he says no. It's really difficult to engage him. He just bluntly refuses and gets really upset if I insist.
Yeah, so I suppose similar to what I've just said, and it seems like I'm probably just trying to fob off the answer and I'm not, but I think it is that same principle of the careful use of reinforcement. And it might just be that what you may think is reinforcing for that person maybe isn't, and it changes. The things we find reinforcing one week could be different to the next week, and that is quite normal that changes. And I think again, it comes back to understanding, what if we go back a couple of months ago before all this began, what changed? Like when did these refusals start coming in, and start thinking analytically about, right, were there new people involved? Were there new activities? Was there new routines? Did we take something out? Is there a new medication? What you're trying to do is effectively just tick off a list of things of what was different from now to 3 months ago when we didn't have all of these refusals. If you can pinpoint it down to 1 or 2 things, great, you've got something to work on. If you can't pin it down to anything, then it's about bringing in other people. And I think, it's that whole idea of two minds are better than one. So if you at home are saying, I can't work out, I've really tried to think about what he was doing, why he wasn't refusing 2 months ago, but now he is, get input from other people who are involved with your child, because actually often, despite us always saying, we talk to each other all the time, you could often say to the social worker, have you seen anything? Or you might say to the community nurse or the teacher, what do you think? They might go, oh, actually, I did have to think about it and I thought of this. And it's the one thing that no one else has thought of. And so it's that idea that collective approach to understanding these sort of things is really important. But I would really recommend kind of really pinning down what are the reinforcers and making sure that those reinforcers are available contingent upon following certain requests. I don't know. Yeah, I'll let Sarah add to that now.
Yeah, I really like what you were saying about the reinforcers there, Matthew. That's another key cornerstone in managing behaviour and the reasons why a young person might want to do it. So the key points of this question, I was thinking, was that you might want to think about the different things that you're trying to engage him in. So it says it's very difficult to engage him. So I was thinking, what different things might a parent be trying to engage a young person in? Could it be conversation? Is he just saying, no, I'm not talking to you? Could it be chores, housework, that kind of thing? You need to tidy your room. Could it be getting on with homework? Could it be family activities that I know parents often find difficult, like taking someone shopping, which is often a chore for the young person? Daily routines, the daily routine of life, doing it when he refuse to do his teeth, does he won't get in the bath? So and all of those behaviours that we want someone to do, they've all got different purposes, and some of them are absolute essentials, because if we don't go out to the shops, we haven't got any food, or if we, it's not very nice if we never have a bath. They're normal civilised human routines that we get people to get on with. So there are slightly different ways that you might engage, which one is the most important, because the question says, Every suggestion, it's no. And he's in a phase. And that suggests to me that there's a certain, maybe it feels as if it's normalised now. Now, I don't know psychologically whether there is actually a phase, because when you say phase, it makes it sound a bit scientific, as if this is something that they're all going to go through. And it might just be that this young person has figured out that actually all he has to do is say no, and then people get in a fluster, and he can have a bit of power, and people aren't quite sure what to do. So I think it's about reversing that for him, showing him that you do know what to do, you don't get in a fluster, you do have a plan, and therefore maybe there might be some situations where, well, it doesn't matter that you've just said no, we're going shopping, get in the car. And if he can see that it doesn't make any difference with easier things, then he will have less of a inclination to keep using the same strategy. Say, for example, if he won't clean his teeth, well, you can either clean your teeth using this mouthwash or you can use this toothbrush, but you will clean your teeth. So whichever's the easiest battle. So out of everything, it feels like everything at the moment, but out of everything, there's a big pile of them, which is an easiest one that you can win on. And you'd start to pick them off like that and show him that it doesn't actually make a difference that he says no. He doesn't actually have the right to say no to some things. And whereas other things, it sounds like it might be that he's got in a bit of a pickle and confusion about what it is that he can negotiate with, which would be reasonable, and what it is that are non-negotiable. So things like visuals around the place really help as well. So, you know, your daily diary, for example, today we'll be going shopping, and we'll be cleaning teeth routine at this point. We'll be going shopping later on. There'll be a time for playing games. The more that a young person can see that this is the norm, we have this structure in this family. In this room, we do this. These are the bathroom rules. These are the kitchen rules. We put our plates away after we've eaten. So that there are many different ways of getting him to understand that these are the rules, this is what we do, this is what we all do, this is what our family does, and this is how we do it, so that he has fewer and fewer options to actually say no, and it means anything. It doesn't have to mean anything if he says no, and you don't always have to deal with him using speech. You can just say, come on, let's go, we're off, and if they might say no, you kind of jolly him out of it and just carry on with it anyway. But if he's got into a rut with it, you'll need to find the easiest battles to do that with, which is the most likely one that you're going to win. And I think we said earlier on in this session that you can start to chip away at the huge mountain of them saying no, or of them being violent, or of them doing whatever it is that's causing difficulties. By picking out the easier ones, and then eventually there'll start to be more of them than there are of the other things. And if you couple that with the reinforcements that Matthew was talking about earlier, that's the way to do that one. It takes time. Parents and teachers, when we give advice, often say, we've done that, we've tried that, and it doesn't work. But it does take time. And you have to stick to it and be resilient, because there's a kind of a finite amount of things to do, but you can do them in many different ways. So the advice would be, find the thing that does reinforce it for him. If you've tried it with, you know, maybe it gets time to watch. It gets to watch a film on TV or something, and that wears out in the end. And try it with something else. But I would never recommend massively increasing expensiveness of stuff. It's largely just your attention and time that they are actually saving.
Right, the next question is from Becky. There's 3 separate points, so I'll just read it all out, and then maybe you might want to unpick it a little bit. Total meltdowns, aversion around getting changed or having nappy changed. He's only 4. We've tried visuals, different rooms, motivators, treats for doing it, or letting us do it, distraction with toys, iPad, and non-work. He doesn't seem bothered by any particular bit of it sensory-wise, but just hates the process of it being done. The second point, self-harming when upset. If any demands are placed on him, he doesn't want to adhere to, he will bite himself. We've tried lessening the demands, visuals, all of the above, choose, etc., but none seem to work. And then refusal to use the toilet. We tried toilet training and had it cracked within about a week for wheeze, but then he totally refused to go on for about 4 weeks in a row and we had to go back to nappies. We tried all the above ideas and they all worked really well until he realised that it was a daily occurrence and it went the same way as other daily demands like getting ready.
That's quite I suppose that's quite an in-depth, it's very helpful to have that much information, I suppose, is useful. I mean, sadly, my first piece of advice to that would be, if you are at the point where you have in your mind done everything you can to manage that situation and to understand that situation, you saying, we've tried this, we've tried this, we've tried this, that might be now time to go back to the powers that be and say that actually, here is what I've done up to this point. I now need some extra support from you in whatever form that takes to help me understand what's going on. And I think, there is real merit in doing this kind of groundwork yourself, but it is learning when it is time to say, I need someone else to have a look at this as well. And it's not to say that you're doing anything wrong at all. And there's no problem in asking for someone else's view, because again, it's just having that multiple viewpoints. Someone might go, yeah, I can see what it is, at least partially, I think it might be this. Now, I'd be interested to know what you're saying about with the nappy changes and things, the fact that you feel like he's not bothered by any of it in sensory wise particularly. I would be interested to know why you think that, because I think, based on the fact that we've got real meltdowns, as you're calling them, to having nappies changed, but we've also got a regression and quite serious refusal now of toileting as well. Now, there are the two things that I would first want to rule out are medical causation. Is there anything medically that is causing him discomfort with toileting? And the other things are, looking at, so if we think it isn't sensory, probably best to just rule that out. Because I think if you can rule medical and sensory cause out, then we know we are on to something called operant behavior, which is it has a purpose. Whereas in sensory behavior and medical behavior, it could be pain, it could be discomfort, it might be that they process certain sensations differently to us. So what we feel as, for example, some people feel gentle, soft touch, we would be fine with that. Some people would process that like pain. So I suppose I would probably want to rule out some of the medical causations first before going further in detail onto that. And again, for me, self-harming is one of those, if we talk about behavior in terms of efficiency, a more efficient behavior gets a response faster for them not having to do so much. And self-harm is one of those very, very efficient behaviors that actually you don't have to do very much for somebody to come running and do something about it. I've worked with people who self-harm by headbutting things. They won't headbutt concrete walls and they won't headbutt floors with hard floors. They will find like hollow walls and they'll headbutt those because they make a lot of noise and it makes people immediately go, oh my God, that sounds awful. And it makes people respond faster. And so again, it brings me back to my point around now it's about learning what is the trigger to that and trying to kind of analyze, right, in a situation before we change, before we put any demands on him, what is the lead up to that situation? At what point do you see your child start to get a little worked up? And you then will be able to start to pick out certain triggers that they're finding difficult. And as I say, the easier way of doing that would be to rule out medical and sensory first so that you don't have to worry about those being, well, it's a possibility.
Yeah, I've made some notes about all of the cases and I'd written those as well. I think it's really important to rule out the medical. There were one or two other bits and pieces. Another reason for sensory, for head banging and that kind of thing, and some kinds of self-harm, it can also be a form of sensory seeking. So Matthew was talking about seeking other professional opinions. So the GP and the health professionals will be able to see if there is actually some issue around his the mechanics of urinating. And it might well be that the health professionals could also do a full sensory assessment of him as well, because it might be that he's seeking stimulation because that's the sort of thing that he needs. So other things that I was thinking about, because it did occur to me that the aversion to having the nappy changed might be linked with the toilet. It might be something with the toileting in the third part of the question, where he refused to go to the toilet as well, so now we're having to go back to nappies. So there might be something about his understanding. It could be cognitive as well. It could be got the medical side of things. And I did wonder, he's 4 years old, he should be able to, if he was developing if he was meeting his milestones in the way that average children do, you would think he'd be able to communicate with his speech at that age. So I was just wondering if that is the case. Is he able to communicate in an age-appropriate manner? And what's he saying? Do you get any clues from that? So the other thing I thought of then was practical strategies to try and get him through this thing that he really hates. And I was thinking of an analogy. None of us find going to the dentist very pleasant. So I thought about, maybe if you thought about, it might be for him having the nappy changed akin to us going through an unpleasant experience like going to the dentist. And what would we want to happen? We'd want it over with as quick as possible. We'd want to be warned about what's going to happen. We'd want some comfort while it's happening. And we might want a little bit of something nice to happen to us when we've got through it. So if you could maybe use those strategies to help relieve him whilst he's having his nappies changed, I thought they might be some practical ways through it. So you might give him some kind of indication about when it's going to happen. You might, visuals, we've talked about visuals all the way through, and they're a great help in schools, and they can be a help for parents as well. You just need a few symbols that you could have in, maybe on the wall in the kitchen, just nappy changing time, tea time, breakfast time, cleaning the teeth time, just so that he's got an idea that this is what's coming up, and then he will start to understand that it happens as quickly as possible. He has some soothing strategy whilst it's happening, maybe a nice big teddy to hold on to or something that you can distract him with, whilst it's done with quickly. And eventually, again, he will learn that it's not such a big ordeal. It's something that has to happen because we all, whether we're little babies or toddlers or young children, older children or adults, we all have to deal with our toileting in some way. And so it also made me wonder if there was an underlying undiagnosed condition that might mean he's got cognitive issues around this anyway. Could he have a neurodiversity that's not yet been explored? But hopefully, with those few potential practical strategies as well, you might get some relief with that.
Brilliant, thank you. Looking at the time, we've probably got time for one more question. Any that we've not answered, we will give a response to afterwards and put them on the Parents Forum pages. But the last question we can probably do today is from Danielle. My 4-year-old daughter is autistic and can sometimes have challenging behaviour. This can present as kicking, screaming, biting, throwing objects and smacking. This can occur any time when she's overwhelmed, when there's a change, or when she doesn't have an understanding of what's going on around her. There are times, however, when I think she may have insight into what she is doing and that it may be wrong. I will get her to apologise, but not sure of the best way in which to punish such behaviour, as such things as a naughty step may not work due to her understanding.
Do you mind if I start that one, Sarah?
Not at all. No,
Bro.
not at all.
Okay, so I suppose the first thing I want to pick out of that answer is that so from a PBS perspective, we would take the line that punishment has been shown to not be effective in managing behaviour, and that comes as quite a contradiction to what we've kind of always been told, and it's why sometimes when I discuss that, people sort of look quite puzzled. It's important to understand. I'm not saying that we don't give consequences to behaviour, but that in terms of things like punishment, like you've given the example of a naughty step, that can actually make the problem worse. And so the reason for that is that, let's say I have thrown something off the table and therefore I have something taken away from me that I like a toy or a laptop or an iPad. Because that was in no way related to the behavior, it depends, and you mentioned it yourself, so you've kind of touched upon it, is that level of understanding. If I do not understand the cause and effect of my behavior and why my laptop is now gone, it triggers what's called the motivational defense circuit, which is when we feel like we have been personally wronged, we are more likely to do something to try and right that wrong. So let's say that I've had a behavior, you have taken my iPad off me now because I've done what you feel is wrong. I may now think, right, well, I want my iPad back. So I'm going to have another behavior now that's even worse because I want you to give me my iPad back. And so punishment in that respect can make situation worse. And so I suppose what I would sort of really focus on there is, you're talking about when she's overwhelmed, when there's change, or when she doesn't understand what's going on around her. That for me will be about really developing when she's in a calm state of mind through use of visuals, timetables, planners, is giving her as much structure and routine as you can. And so for a lot of people, specifically with certain conditions like ADHD and autism, not having an understanding of what's happening next or any control over a situation can lead to such heightened anxiety levels that they come out as behavior. And so what I would be looking to do is avoid environments and situations where overwhelming is likely. And if you spot the early warning indicators that your child is starting to get overwhelmed, it's about, again, like we said earlier, labeling it, saying, I can see you getting upset. How about we go out and take a break? Even if you just go out of a shop for 5 minutes, just to have a calm down and go back in, that's a better way of dealing with the situation. And again, it will be about developing routines, timetables, structure, so that that person knows exactly what's happening now, exactly what happened before this, and exactly what's happening next. And if you can get them to engage in that themselves, let's say you've got a big strip and it says, car, school, paint, lunch. And as they've got in the car, they take car off the board themselves. So they have had a part in that. They know what they've just done and they can now see what's coming next. And I suppose what I would again then look at is when you start to understand the behaviors and the consequences and the triggers to those behaviors, rather than punishing behavior that has happened, I would put your emphasis and your focus more on stopping those behaviors from occurring in the first place through recognition of triggers, through giving timetables and routines, things like that. And it's also worth remembering that when somebody has been through a crisis situation and they are upset and they are coming down, they are not going to come straight back down to baseline immediately. It can take some time. And sometimes by insisting that someone apologizes for something they've done and they haven't volunteered that apology, again, that can actually re-trigger a behavior and they can go back into crisis. And so it's about, after an incident, thinking carefully about still how you're talking to them, how many demands are you placing on them, are you asking too much of them, because they still need to come down. After I've had an argument with someone, I'm not 3 seconds later going to be back into it completely fine, talk to me as normal. I'm still going to need a little bit of space and time to calm down. So I would probably focus efforts more on the reinforcement of positive behavior rather than the punishment of the bad behavior. Hope that kind of makes sense. Sarah, do you want to add to that? Because I'm sure you've got points to say.
Yeah, I wholly agree with all of that. Yeah, because it occurred to me that the remorse process is quite a complicated and advanced thing. And as Matthew just said, it might often take, you need processing time as a neurotypical adult. So as a neurodiverse child, they're probably going to need more processing time and more time to be able to understand what's just happened and what they need to do to make it better. So I wholly agree with what Matthew has just said there, and I don't think it's. I think there are lots of other strategies there instead of being worried about whether you've put a consequence in place or whether you've asked them to apologise or not, because as I said, that's a very complicated theory of mind piece of action that is quite complicated for adults as well. I think that was everything that I had on that one. And
the only thing I wanted, oh, sorry, carry on, Sarah.
Yeah, I think coming at it, trying to prevent the likelihood that it's going to happen is the best strategy to follow, rather than trying to do, well, clearly if they do happen, you have to deal with it afterwards, but I would not get hung up on the apology or something seen as a punishment. There is always a consequence to a behaviour, even if it's one that nobody else has noticed, and that might itself be the consequence. But it's more about putting things right rather than, and an apology doesn't always put things right either. So it's very that's a complicated thing that we have created that might not be relevant to her.
Yeah, I suppose just to touch on the point that Danielle's added there about kind of aiming behaviour, and Julie's kind of touched on it as well, is that shared attention can sometimes be a very known trigger. And so the one thing I will say about not just Danielle's question, but I think pretty much every single question we've covered so far, is that if there is one thing you take from this, is that if you are applying a behavioural intervention or you are applying a strategy, consistency is absolutely paramount. If you say yes, if you say no 10 times and yes on the 11th time, all that person has learned is I've just got to push the first 10 times. And then eventually you will say yes. And so when you've got two parents, it is important that both parents follow exactly the same strategies in exactly the same way, so that what that child learns is, if I ask this question, or if I do this behavior, or if I get involved in this activity, I'm going to get the same response from every adult around me. And so again, it links into that understanding of structure. If that person feels like they are going to have the same response from everybody, and the consistency is important, then that behavior is likely to come down faster.
Brilliant. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Matthew and Sarah for agreeing to do this session. I hope that everybody's found it really useful, and thank you everybody for coming as well. If there are any topics or subjects for future webinars that anybody would like to hear about, let us know and we'll see if we can put something together. And if you've got any feedback about this particular session, you can let us know through our Facebook pages or by emailing us on supportnews@pfba.org.uk. Julie, did you want to just say anything before we go?
I've just been doing the chat box bit. So we had a huge amount of questions. And for all those that we didn't get around to today, I'm so sorry, but it's such an interesting subject. And I think some of the questions that we did cover did actually touch on some of the other questions that we'd got in. But for all those who sent questions in, we will be responding and getting an answer to you. And if you want to do this again and you found it useful, then we will try and arrange to put it on again. It's hard enough with our kids and behaviour under normal circumstances, but we have to reflect on what COVID is doing to our lives at the moment as well. But thank you so much for sharing your time with us. You take something from it. Okay, people, you all stay safe, will you please? Be in touch very, very soon. Bye-bye.